B, and I'm a truly grateful recovering alcoholic. And my recovery date is November the 6th of 1999. So this past November, I celebrated 23 years of being in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, something that I just did not ever dream possible. Thank you, Steve, for having me come here tonight. You know, it's funny because I thought, what the heck did he hear me say to invite me to another meeting? But thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And happy birthday to anybody that's celebrating a birthday this month, and welcome to anybody here this evening that is new. So yeah, my story, it's always even though I get nervous before I come and share my experience, strength, and hope, it's always something that I believe is part of God's will for my life to just come out and just share about it, regardless of in my story, everybody in this room hasn't done what I did. But like the book talks about, I'm sure that we have all kind of felt the same way or thought some of the same things and all that kind of stuff. And so, anyway, I was born and raised over in Eastern Washington, Yakima, Washington. And it's funny because my mom had me when she was 16 years old, and I was talking to my granddaughter. I have a granddaughter that's 19 years old, and we were coming back from Costco earlier today, and she said, "Now, how old was Grandma when she got pregnant with you?" I was like, "Well, we did a little bit of math." I said, "Well, she must have gotten pregnant at 15, had me at 16, and she gave birth to me, but what happened is that my grandfather, who was a pretty religious person, felt that by her getting pregnant at 16, she had disgraced the family. And so he made my mom leave home and kept me. So I was raised by my grandparents and my two aunts, my mom's two younger sisters. And I never knew who my biological dad was, because what I later found out, and I didn't find this out until I came into AA, is that my mom getting pregnant at 15, my biological dad was 21. And my grandfather ran him out of town. He said, "Hey, you're going to go to jail or you leave town." And so he made the choice to leave town. And I later learned he went into the army and all that good stuff. But anyway, so that my parents, in my young mind, uh, thinking that they had just abandoned me because I didn't know the whole story. And what that made me felt like, it made me feel unwanted. It made me feel unloved, because it's like, here are the two primary people in your life as a child, and then they just up and leave. So I grew up, feeling abandoned. On top of that, my mom has an older sister who married a preacher, and he was a pretty prominent preacher in Yakima, and he molested me. I think I was like 3 or 4, and I didn't know what to do with that information, and so I held on to that. I held on to that until I came into the rooms of AA. A lot happened to me when I came into the rooms of AA in terms of getting honest about some stuff, but I held on I held on to that, and I held on to the anger and the pain and the hurt and the hatred that I had towards my mom. And so eventually, my mom, when she left Yakima, she came over here. She got a job at Boeing. She married my stepdad, and she worked at Boeing. My mom did really good for herself. She worked at Boeing until she retired. I think she retired in 2007, 2008. So she worked all her life. It wasn't like she just was a bad girl. She made a mistake getting pregnant at 50. Well, I can't say I'm a mistake, but she got pregnant early in life, but she came over here and she did really well for herself. So she married my stepdad. They bought a home. He had 3 sons, so it's kind of this blended family. So when she sent for me to come over here from Yakima, I was still angry towards my mom. I still had a lot of resentment, and so my primary mission when I came over here from Yakima was to get back at my mom. I wanted to make her life miserable. And what I did, I started drinking and taking all kinds of stuff in middle school. I was thinking, it's like, I don't even know how I got out of middle school in terms of going from grade to grade to grade. And I don't know how I made it to high school, because I wasn't showing up for class. I spent most of my time at the park across the street drinking and getting high. But I kept going from the next grade to the next grade until I eventually dropped out. And as my drinking and my other habits began to become stronger, I had to have money to support my habits. And so I started prostituting downtown Seattle at night. I kind of lived a double life because I would prostitute downtown Seattle at night, and then I would try to pop up in the classroom, and it's like, but go to school. I wasn't in the classroom, but I was at the school, and but after a while, I couldn't maintain that facade, and so I just dropped out of school and became this full time prostitute and supported my habit, working the streets of downtown. I remember one time I was working the streets. I was in Portland, Oregon, and I was working the streets in Portland. And I jumped in this guy's car because that's what us prostitutes do, just jump in strangers' cars. And this guy put a gun to my head. Ooh. And I thought, wow, I thought I was going to die. I absolutely thought I was going to die. But he put the gun to my head and he took whatever few dollars of money that I had and he kicked me out of his car. And, anybody with some common sense probably would have taken that experience and like, you know what, this is the last time I'm going to do that. But not, I didn't. I continued to live that lifestyle. And what happened is I had my first child and the streets became a little bit too dangerous. And Louise kind of touched on it. The Green River Killer was out at that time. And I thought, well, I didn't want to still be out there being a prostitute. So someone introduced me to the world of forgery. So I would forge people's checks. Right. So I would forge checks. I would use other people's IDs and go into the banks and forge checks and, take other people's credit cards and just ran rampant, just doing all kinds of illegal activity to support my habits because that I didn't know anything else to do. I didn't have the skills to do anything else. And quite honestly, if I had the skills, my addiction wouldn't allow me to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and go to a job. That just wasn't in me to do at that time because I stayed up night and day drinking and getting high. I'm going to bed at 6, 7 o'clock when the average person might be getting up and going to work. And so I just didn't have the ability to even try to get a job, but I had to support my habit. And so along the way, I ended up having a set of twins, and so I had my 3 sons. And there was a time during my alcoholism where every now and again I would be able. It would have the appearance that I was trying to take care of the kids and keeping a clean house and all that kind of stuff. And then one day, my family, my mom's and her 2 sisters stopped by, and the house was a mess, and I was a mess, and the children were a mess. And they intervened on me. They came by the following Sunday, and they came and took my children from me. And for a minute there, I grabbed all 3 of my children, and I'm like, no, you're not going to take them. Yes, we are. No, you're not. Yes, we are. And then my mind said, yeah, let them go. That just frees up your time to drink and get high. So they took my children. As a result of that, I became homeless because I stopped paying the rent that I had in the apartment, which was Section 8. I couldn't even pay that. I stopped paying my light bills. I just stopped paying everything, And so one day, and there had been notices on the door, the landlord had been putting stuff on the door, but I would just take it off the door, walk in, lay the stuff on the counter, and not even open it. Until one Monday morning rolled around and there was a knock on the door and it was the sheriff. They were coming to put me and everything that I owned literally on the sidewalk, to the curb. So I walk out this apartment and I'm walking right by all of my stuff. And I don't know, I guess how part of the disease affected me was that I didn't have the ability to really feel anything. I didn't really feel anything about that. I just walked by it and was just trying to figure out what am I going to do next. So I remember getting on a bus and going downtown Seattle, and somehow I ended up getting a job at the Sorrento Hotel right off of Madison. And I was working at the Sorrento, and I met this guy that worked there. He was a chef, and I was working in housekeeping. And kind of like Louise said, he said hi. There it was. Relationship started. And the other thing about him is that he had an apartment. He had a place to stay. So I thought, well, this is wonderful. I ain't gonna stay with him. But what I didn't know about him was that he was an alcoholic. I knew he was, but I did not have the ability to see my own problems. He would buy bottles of alcohol and would drink all night long. And then he became pretty verbally abusive. And I knew, I couldn't really stick around for that. I just didn't know it. But what I didn't realize was that when I left that apartment, I was pregnant. And I was pregnant with a daughter. And because my disease continued to progress. I just did not have the ability to go see a doctor. I thought about it. I thought about, I knew with everything inside me that I couldn't care for her. I wasn't really taking care of myself. But I went along with that. I thought about terminating the pregnancy, but I just could not bring myself to pick up the phone and make an appointment. And so, still forging, supporting my habit, running from here to Phoenix, Arizona, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then one day I had went and got some money, and I was sitting down at a Seward Park, sitting in my car, drinking and getting high. And all of a sudden my water bag broke. And after I finished getting high, I drove myself to the UW hospital where I gave birth to my daughter. And beautiful baby girl. She reminded me so much of my grandmother when I saw her, and she tested positive for cocaine. And so when they were discharging me, they said, "Well, we can't let you take her with you. But what we want you to do, we want you to come back every day and hold her and stroke her and bond with her and feed her and all that good stuff." And they released me. And the moment I got into that car, my friends that were waiting for me, I never went back. I left my daughter in the hospital, and my mind, my very best thinking told me that, they'll take care of her. I kind of did. They got it. They got diapers and formula, and they'll put her in a home, And so, but you guys, that was one of my secrets that I told myself I would never tell another living soul. I told myself I'm going to take that to my grave because of the shame and the embarrassment and the way I felt about doing that. I felt absolutely horrible. It's like, what kind of a person would do that to a child? It was enough that my mom and my aunts had already came and took my sons, but to leave her in the hospital like that, so what that did, because it made me feel like crap, it just made me use and drink even more because I wanted to escape the pain and I wanted to escape the thoughts and the feelings and all that stuff that I had behind leaving her in the hospital. So what eventually happened is that I met a guy, and he too was a dope dealer. And I thought, well, that solves my problem. I don't have to be out there hustling anymore. I could just be with him and all this stuff. And 6 months after I met him, the feds came and kicked the doors in, and we all went to jail. And so I ended up getting 5 years in prison, and they sent me to a federal boot camp in Bryan, Texas. So I stayed at the boot camp for 2.5 years, and then I came back and they gave me 2.5 years of probation to do. And I did really well on the probation because I had to go down to their offices and test and all that kind of stuff. I did really well, and my probation officer thought so too. She said, "You know what? You're doing really well. I'm gonna go before the courts and see if we can get you off in half time." I thought, well, that's wonderful. And she did. She went and had all the paperwork signed off. My lawyer signed off, and she had signed off, and she came to my house, and I signed off, and I thought, oh, this is great. So as soon as she left my house, I called somebody, and I said, listen, we got to celebrate. I'm getting off probation. So that night we went and got high and drank, and the very next morning the PO was at my door, and she said, "You know what? I forgot to take a UA." And so the UA was dirty. And this was in like April of 1999. And from April of 1999 until I got clean and sober in November of 1999 were the worst 6 months of using that I think I had in the whole 20 something years I had been out there. I began to have thoughts of wanting to commit suicide. And, it was at that time that I thought, something's wrong. After all the other stuff I had went through and done and all that kind of stuff, it was like, there's some use and we have a problem. Had thoughts of wanting to commit suicide. That my probation officer had been coming to my house because she's looking for me because I gave her the dirty UA. And she would come and knock on the door, and I knew it was her. And I would tiptoe up to the door and peek out the peek hole and all that kind of crazy stuff. But what happened for me in November was that I had had enough. I had become really sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I called my aunt, and I told her that I wanted to turn myself into my PO. And she said, okay, I'll come pick you up. Let's go down there and talk to her. And so I went down to the probation department and got down there, and she was really good to me. She said, "Well, you know what, Cherise, this is what I can do. I can send you back to prison for 2.5 years, or you can go to detox for 2 weeks." And I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. I'll go to detox. But I had absolutely no intention at all of getting, or not, or at least they might have got me clean and sober, but I had no intentions of staying clean and sober. That just wasn't a thought for me. I just didn't want to go back to prison. So I went to detox, and what happened was this remarkable thing of what AA has, and we have HNI panels that come in, and we were doing groups and stuff, during the day, and a panel came in one evening, and I heard someone come in and share a very similar story to mine. And it wasn't so much that her story was so similar to mine, it was the freedom that she had in which she shared her story. I had been such a secret all my life, and I wanted that freedom. I wanted to be free. And so I went up to her after that meeting and I asked her, hey, I introduced myself and she told me her name. I said, well, where do you go to meetings? And she told me where she went to meetings. And so after my stay at detox, I took my stuff home and I went straight over to the 23rd Cherry Fellowship. Because that's where she told me she went to meetings. And I searched for her and I searched for her and I didn't see her right away. As God would have it, I didn't see her right away. That was just enough time for me to just start going to meetings. And I started going to meetings, and then I eventually seen her maybe 6, 7, 8 months after that. And I asked her to be my sponsor. And at first she said no. And she sent me to a few other women and stuff like that. But eventually I went back to her and I said, hey, you got to sponsor me. I need some help. And she did. And she was the very first person that took me through all 12 of the steps as they're outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have since, gone through the steps. I've gone through the steps many times after that. And in fact, going through the steps again right now with my new sponsor, who's here this evening. But remarkable things begin to happen as a result of my going through the steps. And so, it's kind of like Louise talked about. It wasn't so much of the material possessions that because when you stop spending your money on drugs and alcohol, it's like you could do another different thing or two in life, right? You can start doing some other stuff. And I also knew deep down inside that I had caused so much damage to my children. The very same thing that I had vowed I wouldn't do, my mom did to me. She abandoned me. I did the exact very same thing to my children, and I vowed I wouldn't do that, but I had. And it damaged my kids tremendously. I remember, going to some of my very first meetings, women's meetings over at the 23rd Fellowship on Cherry, and my twin sons would be out there on the corner selling drugs. And I knew that my being absent in their lives had a pretty profound effect on the choices that they were making at that time. So went through the steps, and as a result of going through the steps the first time, I was scared. I would sit in meetings and I would hear people talk about the fourth step and all that kind of stuff. And I was scared to do a fourth step because I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea. But one thing that stayed in my mind was that these other people have gone through it and they're still here. Nothing crazy has happened to them. In fact, their lives seem to be working a little bit better as a result. So went through the steps, got a chance to make amends to my children. I was able to sit my children down, make amends to my children. Was able to sit my mom down, make amends to my mom because I had, dropped out of school. I had stole my mom's jewelry, one of her favorite gold chains and some of her other stuff, and just doing stuff that addicts and alcoholics do. And I was able to sit down and make amends to my family. And today I really try to practice making those living amends to my family. A couple of years ago, I work, now. I work a real legal job. Been working at the same place since 2006, which is a miracle. And a couple of years ago, I was sitting at my desk at work and I got a phone call. And I didn't recognize the caller. And I wasn't going to answer it because a lot of spam calls were coming in and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, but something said, answer the phone. And I answered the phone. I said, hello. And the person on the other end said, are you Cherise? And I said, yeah, who's this? And she said, I think you're my mom. And I about to fell out my chair. I was about to fall out my chair because that was my daughter calling me. She had found us. And she said she had gotten my name from some of her adopted family. It was in the paperwork. She had gotten my name. She went on Facebook, looked, found my phone number. She actually paid. You can go put somebody's name in Google, and they'll send you information about that person if you pay the 1995. She paid the 1995, and she said they sent her back a big old pack of information about me. So she and my phone number. She said my phone number was the second number on the list, and she was going to go down the list and call each number until she found me. So we made that you guys. I couldn't work the rest of that day. I didn't know how to handle that phone call, but we talked, went outside, talked to her, and I don't know why I felt the need to try to explain as much to her as I could in that moment about why I left. I just felt it was important for me to begin to try to let her know it wasn't anything that she did wrong. It was because I was just in a bad way at that time. So we made an appointment, her brothers and I, my mom, I just brought the whole family. We met her and everything seemed to be going well. So for the first few months, she would come over and we would communicate and all that stuff. And then, bam, she just kind of just dropped off out the way. She told me that she just couldn't understand, with all of the explaining and all of that stuff I tried to do to get her to understand why things happened the way they did. She just couldn't understand, her comment was, I don't understand why you didn't leave me at grandma's house like you left the boys. And I thought, well, that thought never crossed my mind. My mom had three of my sons already. What would I look like bringing the fourth child? Just here you go. But that thought never crossed my mind. I just really thought that leaving her where I left her, that they would, take care of her and put her in a home, which they did. But I later found out that she was molested in that home and she struggled a lot. There was a lot of things that happened to her. And she blames me for that. Right now, my daughter hates me. I still do try to reach out to her though. I'll reach out to her through Messenger. How you doing? Is it y'all's you and her son and all that kind of stuff. And she'll respond, but she doesn't really want to have anything to do with me. So the best thing that I can do for that today is I just pray. I pray and I just pray to God that if it's His will for us to have a relationship, then we will have a relationship. But the nice thing about that is that her and my older son, they communicate, which I think is pretty good. It's just she's not feeling me right now, and I get it. I get it because I know how I felt towards my mom when she left me, so I understand that. So today, though, man, that time went really fast. But today, you guys, like I was saying, it's not about the material possessions that I get in life anyway. It's about this program has brought a happiness, some joyousness, and some freedom that was it was what I was looking for in addiction. It's what I thought that the drugs and alcohol would do for me, but they didn't. Working the steps in this program, following the simple suggestions that you guys offer, that you guys tell people, getting outside of myself and helping somebody else, still having a sponsor to give me guidance and stuff like that when I need it. Because my mind will sometimes tell me, you got 23 years, you don't really need a sponsor to tell you what to do. But I do. I have learned over the years that I just can't listen to my own thinking because that's where my problem centers in my thinking. My problem centers in my thinking. And so, I don't know, I'm just really grateful to be here and to, just share just a little bit about myself with you guys, about my experience, strength, and hope. And so, again, thank you, Steve, for having me. And thank you guys all for allowing me to share.